Good evening, everybody. I'm John O'Loughlin. Welcome to my channel. It's called McDuff Lives 2, and we're here tonight for our Thursday night gathering with Professor Hamamoto and George Webb. Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening, John. Good evening, George.
Hi, Doctor.
Good evening, everybody in the chat room. So nice to have a very active chat. They've been going at it, for a good 15 minutes. So, and it's always fun because it's always done in good taste. And we have great moderators, but generally we don't need them. The trolls come and go. But anyway, it's a great chat room, and so carry on, folks. Hello, David, Corky, Charles, Salsa, Mrs. Marks, ECAT, Cass, and Deborah, Alderson, Biomancer. Wow, I can't name everybody, but I'm glad you're all here. And we're glad that you're all there. So I think last week I started with Professor Hamamoto. So let's be fair and start off tonight and see what's on George Webb's mind. What's your number one topic for the night, George?
Well, I'm here at the Charette House across the river from you, McDuff. And sorry, my gimbal failed there for a second. We had an earthquake, but we have, let's see, 5 of the ospreys here. And then we got 2 more coming in on this side of the river. And we had a real heartfelt osprey come down from New York. Her father is going to be interred at the Arlington National Cemetery tomorrow, and she was sharing her speech with us. And so it was, and we just, I mean, the whole time we're thinking of McDuff. The whole time, why isn't McDuff in Arlington? And so that's been a solemn day, but it's been a good day of research here so far.
Okay, so you're going to be going to the funeral, do you think?
Yeah, tomorrow at 1 o'clock. Yeah.
Cool. That's always a very, very impressive ceremony. And Professor Hamamoto, how about yourself? I know you've been very active on your YouTube channel, and what's going on with you?
Yes. Well, today I spent the talk that I give at 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. It's an hour-long show. It was a tribute to citizen journalism. And I started with some of the classics in chemical biological warfare, and I circled around and I ended with the one George Webb with this book. And I think everybody's in a, if I'm correct, is in a celebratory mood because one of the giants of independent journalism has finally said, "Hey, let's talk about NATO." It's not so much about the Chacoms anymore. The name-calling stuff is over. Now we're getting down to brass tacks here. So that's on the table now, and that's for the better. And if only it had been put out there a year and a half ago, we'd be further along here. But in that light, George, I wanted to ask you your opinion, and I haven't really gone through all the documents myself, but what do you think of the recent Project Diffuse drops and the fact that supposedly DARPA is giving this information? They're being made out, the Pentagon, DARPA are made out to be the good guys in putting this information out to the public.
Well, so Dr. Hamamoto is referring to Alex Jones at InfoWars now has come over to our side and stopped this racist term Chicoms, and now he's saying NATO did it 18 months later, finally. But, we'll take it, he has 3 satellites, so we're not going to argue with Alex. But this diffuse thing, I think, is to diffuse the citizen journalism movement. We're hot on the trail. We know DARPA did it, and we know DARPA is feathering out its through proxies for pay to play for their little private DARPA. So they're doing their DARPA where we get to invest the billions and trillions to develop the weapons, and then they're using proxies to privatize this DARPA. And this is just yet another, I think, attempt. I don't have a complete look at this, but it looks like another attempt to say, oh, we're the good guys, when in actual fact we've been making trillions on the side. And we send all the proposals to ourselves, and that's the first thing that I don't like, is when somebody is putting out the bid and then sending the proposal to themselves, and then they make the decision all in one loop, and it's only 6 people. That's a red flag.
Well, yeah, the Pentagon itself, or a Pentagon contractor, years ago wrote this theoretical paper, and I guess they've implemented the concept, and it's the infamous self-licking ice cream cone. That's the model. Just send the proposals to yourself, sign off on it, and distribute the spoils, and then give us these little feeds like the so-called Project Diffuse. I think they're trying to diffuse George Webb and citizen journalism. That's what I think.
I think you're right. I mean, if looking at that document, it really does smack of, hey, yeah, we developed all this coronavirus. Yeah, we developed Moderna from its very earliest days. Yeah, we did SARS, we did MERS, we did the universal vaccine. We did all these things that make it look like it was a game just for us to benefit a private DARPA. But let's go ahead and now we're taking the trillions in. Let's go ahead and have this kind of Rockefeller, charity that gives a pittance to some group, and let's invite every journalist known to mankind to cover the $100,000 we give to some group after we've banked the millions in Geneva.
Mm-hmm. And of course, they'll be celebrating certain favored journalists, mainstream. And I think they're even going to start cherry picking people from the so-called independent journalistic area, like people like Ben Shapiro, who've already been positioned for that particular function, right?
Joe Rogan, I think, is another one. I
Yeah.
think James O'Keefe's another one. These are safe players that are always going to never go too far, never going to gore the ox. They're going to maybe, make the ox flip his tail at a fly here and there, but they're never going to go for the jugular. And we do. We said this thing was from the beginning a bioweapon, a series of bioweapons, and it's a pay-to-play on the vaccine, a virus vaccine game. We're not moving off that. It's nice to see Alex Jones come over with InfoWars, and we welcome James O'Keefe and all of those folks from Project Veritas. We all need to get all the wood behind this arrow on this sharp spear here, because we're winning if we stay to this message, I think.
Absolutely. And George, let me ask you, you seem to be quite magnanimous of the fact that your work of the past year and 18 months has been, to put it politely, plagiarized, and you got someone running to the front of the line again, just like on January 6th, right? But all that aside, George, if invited, would you go on the Alex Jones show?
Yeah, I've done this show before, 4 years ago, and I have nothing against Alex. He's a huge presence with the 3 satellites and so forth. I sure would. I know Owen Schroyer. I like Owen. David Knight, when he was there, was a great guy, and I did his show number of times. So I have nothing against the InfoWars guys, as long as they've come off like you. You've been the number one guy out there, Dr. Hamamoto, of saying you have to end this Chi-Com thing.
Yeah.
You're the number one guy. You're the number one voice out there saying that, and I think they got the message.
Well, you know what? They'd had that. By the way, I really don't care what people. I've been called everything in the book. I just laugh along with everybody else. It doesn't matter. I just did it for a strategic person to kind of reason to shake the tree and say, hey, maybe we better rethink this, and there's maybe some other players. So there was a little bit, my feelings are not hurt. The larger target was to say, hey, come on, let's talk about who's really behind it, the dark hand, as you say. Now, along the same lines, George, would you go on the Joe Rogan show?
Sure, I would go on the Joe Rogan show, but only if I could show the new McDuff book in paperback that just hit the stands at Amazon.com. John, is it possible that you could show us the new paperback that just hit the stands at Amazon.com?
Oh, you mean this paperback right here, the one that's on the shelf behind me? Yeah, I got one right here in my hand, and it's called McDuff Lives. And yeah, thanks for the very subtle lead in there, George. But we're celebrating books, and we're celebrating all of George's great work. But George inspired me to do this. I wasn't going to do this. The last thing I wanted to do was write a book. But there's something special about holding it in your hand. And this is the first day that I've been able to do that. Got a box of them in the mail today. And really, it's a milestone for me to have this in my hand. It looks great. Andy did the layout. My wife did a lot of great editing. She saved me 3 pages by cutting all my commas out. Awesome, So,
Yeah, that's
yeah,
funny.
well, she's one of those grammar Nazis. So anyway, you're going to get good grammar along with some really good biography. The thing is, we started the show talking about NATO and how NATO is not only obsolete, it's turned into a nemesis. I don't want to say enemy because they're still us, right? But the way they're organized is to use us to enrich the already elite rich of the world. It's not even rich Americans. It's just the elites of the elites that are benefiting from NATO. And this has been the project of NATO. And like it's dawning on me, and with the help of so many great researchers that have helped, but that was what NATO was put in for in the first place. It was never really, because we've been through this with the spies and Kissinger and the atomic secrets that just suddenly flowed into the scientists in Moscow's head, and they all think of it. In other words, there's a huge sham, a huge fake play that's been going on for decades, and now we know that NATO was there to form a framework for the gladios, for the secret stay-behind armies with the arms caches that were there ostensibly, to fight communism. If the Soviets got stupid enough to try to invade Western Europe after being devastated in World War II, then that was the ostensible purpose. But look what they really ended up doing was turning into agents provocateurs to shape Europe into the shape that it was going to be shaped into by the Nazis. I mean, setting aside the Holocaust for a moment, because no, we don't have an active Holocaust going on with ovens and stuff, as far as I know. But nevertheless, there is kind of a Holocaust that's going on with the devastation of our health, with the devastation of our economy, and this is what I think we are seeing is the real, iron fist inside the velvet glove called NATO.
And I would add, we might be seeing a real Holocaust in Western China with the Uyghurs in a NATO partnership, and a lot of drug testing out there and a lot of blood testing. I'll just throw that in there. 400 camps, 400 gulags along that Belt and Road to Rotterdam. So.
Mm-hmm. Now, I know most of the discussion has been centered on the V word and the various concoctions, right? V or not, or fake, or genetic material that are being put out there. But I wanted to warn or alert researchers in the larger community of something, a stealth maneuver. While we're focusing on the V, right, there's another insidious move afoot, and it's psychedelics. I've been doing some work on this for the last couple weeks, and guess what? It's the usual suspects that are heavily invested in legitimizing and using psychedelics, including Johns Hopkins. They launched a Center for Psychedelic Research back in late 2019. right? So what was being workshopped during the 60s with the psilocybin project that came out of Harvard, right? And you have this Unabomber that preceded that, right? Ted Kaczynski, right? And all that MK Ultra material. Now its latest manifestation is the more public distribution, open distribution of psychedelics. And guess who is spearheading that effort in the halls of the U.S. Congress? AOC.
I was going to say that as a joke.
Oh, okay.
No,
No,
I mean, I can't believe it.
Well, that's
No.
where she got the idea for that dress.
Well, she's one of the hallucinati. And she went to Boston University,
Hey,
and
this
so
is
the Harvard
that's-
psilocybin project crossed the River Charles, and it took root at Boston University. One of her mentors, I think he was a pastor. It's called the famous Whitechapel. I think it's called the Marsh Chapel experiment. Right? They celebrated at BU, and this was a psilocybin project. So she comes out of that whole system that we're now beginning to see it glow up. So I think the Uyghurs out in the western part of China, we think about the V's and about blood testing and all that. I think they're being dosed with a lot of psilocybin, opioids, and because listen, we have all these millions of sick people who are in the pipeline now, and people with debilitating diseases, including arthritis. You can't treat them all. But what if you have them all in a hallucinogenic state most of the time? That's going to be their solution to mass healthcare. Keep them in a suspended state of awareness. Let's say the Matrix.
What happened to turn on, tune in, drop out? I thought that was the mantra of the century.
It is, and now we're at the dropout phase.
Yeah,
the false floor is being pulled away, and we're going to go right down the chute.
whoops.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, go ask Alice when she's 10 feet tall. Hey, Alice. Oh, now you're down there. Oh, what happened? Oh, well, let me have some of that.
So yeah.
Weird ideas that they've always had. But if you recall, I read the book "The Strength of the Wolf" by Douglas Valentine, in which
Right.
he did an incredible deep dive into the various narcotics agencies, from the Bureau of Narcotics and Dangerous Drugs, the Federal Bureau of Narcotics, and whatever the other one was. But they're all really lined up one after the other. But the people that were working there were trying to help the CIA figure out how to use drugs to control people's minds. And the LSD was one of them. I don't remember him talking much about psilocybin, but they tried a whole lot about cannabis, THC.
Mm-hmm.
And between LSD and THC, they decided THC was much better. Because the trouble with the LSD is there was no way for them to extract information from this person that's tripping his brains out, So it really, I mean, it might be a way to warehouse people, or to get them to stop thinking about reality. But as far as an investigator's technique, it didn't turn out to be very useful. I think now the idea is to use it as a psychological technique against mass populations, as you're talking about, in order to control them. And that, of course, is a different goal from trying to interrogate. Is to try to keep them dumbfounded, and that may be, it sounds okay to me. I have no idea what's going on with the Uyghurs. And I really do think that I need to know better what is going on along this Belt and Road project. That I've spent a lot of time investigating that with the Schiller folks and Helga Zepp LaRouche's big project. And
Mhm.
I want it to succeed along the lines that they're talking, but then I have concerns about, how are they doing it? And and when I learned last week that Eric Prince's company was providing security for Red China's Belt and Road projects, these supposedly, American contractors that saved us from Saddam Hussein, right? They're over there saving President Xi from the Uyghurs, and I don't know what's really going on over there, and well, Chinatown, right?
The global Chinatown. Well,
China,
this
China.
project, this psychedelic project, it's already in play, and it would be really interesting to see what sort of contracts are coming out of DARPA or the Pentagon to funding these psychedelic programs, um, both in the U.S. and internationally. I talked about Johns Hopkins. That's one of the main ones. There's a big program by here at UC Davis. That's what really tipped me on. That's kind of one of the centers too. But Imperial College in London, they brag that this is the world's first center for psychedelics research, 2019. So this is an emerging story. This is for the Screaming Ospreys, who, we've done a lot of work in other areas, but this is a frontier for you right here. It's a gold mine if you want to check it out, and your contributions would be would be welcome. It'd be very important to flesh out this story, because the tendency is to just kind of cluster onto one story and then move to another. But this is an emerging story. I mean, it's there. The reality's there. But it hasn't been written up yet by alternative sources. Not even the great InfoWars is onto this one yet. You've heard it first today.
Yeah, it's nice to see Alex Jones talking about NATO is behind it all. But this reminds me of the Yellow Submarine days of the Beatles. I don't know if you guys remember that psychedelic phase.
Of course.
Yeah, and then the whole world followed them down this path. Let me take you down where I'm going to. All that. It's kind of like a psychedelic.
Strawberry fields.
Yeah,
Nothing is real. Nothing to get hung about.
yeah, exactly. For 2 years, I think we all, like all my brothers, were lost. They forgot those 2 years. I was a little kid watching them going, what's wrong with you?
Really?
Is much too short as no
They were tripping.
time for fussing and fighting, my friend.
You got it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you got it,
Yeah.
John. So I think
Yeah.
we're seeing what is now coming back. I think, you always come up with these brilliant little gold mines with AOC, because I thought she was just loading people up on the FEMA train, but apparently they're going to use some kind of Soma, Brave New World Soma,
Yeah.
to get people to be okay with being packed into the cattle car.
Exactly.
Yeah.
To extend your Beatles analogy, it'll be the magical mystery tour.
Yeah.
Right? You're going to be dosed on LSD and you're going to go on the bus or the cattle car and you won't really care.
Well, we had, the electric Kool-Aid acid test with Tom Wolfe, and we had Ken Kesey with Further. I can't remember what the bus was called, but there was
that was the name of the bus, I think.
yeah, I think it was, yeah.
The destination was Further.
Further, yeah.
Yeah. And that was the Merry Pranksters.
Yeah.
Those guys were CIA.
Yes.
It was Harvard's CIA guys, out there pretending to be hippies. And
Right.
and may I say, in this connection, that there was a medical doctor that traveled around on that tour with the Wavy Gravy Further bus, and he is now an acclaimed expert in the COVID. He's cited. His name is Brinkley, I think. His name is Brinkley. He was a doctor on that thing, and somehow he's morphed into a top expert in COVID.
Well,
Amazing.
there's a mainstream medical doctor celebrity who was very much part of the Harvard psilocybin experiment, which you're talking about. I mean, it came out of the university and then it was put out in the civilian world, and that is none other than one Andrew Weil.
Mm.
He was right at the center, and one of his colleagues, he was known as Richard Alpert at the time, but then he went the mystical direction and became Baba Ram Das. And
Yes,
then
and Barbara
then you had
Ramdas was.
Timothy Leary. Pardon me?
I'm just saying he was one of them too.
Yes.
Be here now, and that is what ties all this together. Is that concept of be here now. Be here now means don't worry about tomorrow. Forget about yesterday. Everybody's memories change anyway. The
Mhm.
past is never going to be really understood, and the future is a complete unknown. So just be here now. Don't worry about trying to figure that stuff out. It's not possible. Just forget about it. Enjoy yourself. Here, have another toke, you know?
Absolutely. And that LSD connection was also the substrate out of which the IT industry grew in Silicon Valley. Because Ken Kesey studied, I think he was in the MFA program at Stanford University, and that's where he comes out of. But they were dosing heavily, and this is where the pioneers of the IT revolution were trying to take it. That's what they thought they were creating, this new science utopia, which is a constant thread in American culture. Because George, Lady La Jolla and yourself hosted that charrette of a couple. 2 or 3 charrettes ago down in La Jolla. So I've been checking out Scripps and the whole family, EW Scripps, right? They're the newspaper people, as most people know. But he was into developing San Diego as a giant scientific utopia. So we have just this recurrent pattern. Remember, Aristotle said there's only 7 plot lines that we're going. One of the main plot lines in American cultural history is this utopianism, starting from the city on the hill during the colonial days, all the way now to the hygienic utopia that we're being put into here, this bell jar, this biosphere, this sloppy Steve Bannon overseen sterile, hygienic environment where that's free of contaminants, especially the contamination of the ordinary people. The hallucinati, of course, they have free reign. They have their own islands, as you were speaking of today, George, their own islands, their own redoubts, armed redoubts, and remote locations, while we're going to be here in the bell jar.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned the 7 plot lines, and somebody said George Webb needs to learn a few more, because I keep doing the first 3. But anyway, just take the hero genre with McDuff's book. There is something about putting words to print and developing out a part, because it becomes its own thing. It's a part of American culture now.
Yeah.
And it's a strength. It's like we don't think that these are powerful chess pieces now on the board, but they are, because people can go to those and go, hey, wait a minute, McDuff did this, I can do this. I can go out to an Arlington tomorrow to a funeral, and I can go over and kick George in the foot and say, hey, you're on the right track, and look at the blood, NATO blood, you're on the right track. I can go do that. I'm not saying give up classified information, but you can help these citizen journalists by looking at these hero characters. And that's why I did the McDuff book, and John, of course, did the fantastic follow-on book. And they really are, like you said, Doctor, you have to fight fire with fire. This cultural fire is to put us down. It's to anesthetize us. It's to make us confrontational. It's to make us go away and just settle in and shelter in place. And we need to be just as good on the other side with these heroes, these skyhooks that say, no, you can make a difference. You really can.
Absolutely. And the only quarter that I'm seeing that coming from is citizen journalism. Our legislatures, both local and federal, national, are failing us with certain local, notable exceptions. Governor DeSantis just appointed a Harvard Medical School trained Surgeon General for his state. That's a good sign right there. But our military has failed us. We don't even know if we can call it the U.S. military. It's more appropriate to call someone like General Milley a NATO person rather than an American. And our of course the universities have failed us. The medical staff, every sector that we just sort of blind faith believe in, all these great institutions that people like Mr. OLoughlin himself, right? Mr. Thomas OLoughlin, he helped build up the classic FBI. And of course, his contribution to the military, all that is gone now. It's been replaced by these simulacra, right? And that's where our strength is. We can identify them as being synthetic. They're not really protesting; they're performing protesting, right? At these gatherings now. These rioters are not really rioting; they're performing rioting, right? And we're taking that as being genuine and authentic, but it's false, and we could use that false bottom reality to replace it with ours, which is the truth.
Yeah, I think what Aaron is showing is over at ACT, the Atlantic Command Transformation in Norfolk, Virginia, that for the first time on American sovereign soil, we have a French general who's in charge of NATO, a NATO sovereign state, in charge of a U.S. military base.
Wow.
And if that doesn't sound like they triggered Article 5, I don't know what does. Remember, the people in Congress, the Debbie Wasserman Schultzes and so forth, and the Tlaibs and all those, the squad, they are the ones who said they triggered Article 5. And, I look to the power of this, writer's kind of pen versus the sword here. The military will go down because the military doesn't have the populace, doesn't have the people. They know we're writing the truth. They know out flow our pen the truth, and they know military is these traitorous takeover artists, and we're at least winning the high ground. We're at least winning the moral high ground. They may have us on the bioweapons, they may have us on the lockdowns, but at least we're winning the cultural wars at the high ground.
Absolutely. John, do you agree with that assessment?
Yeah, this is the whole point. We're standing here at the edge of the quicksand, watching everything slip away that was built for us. The song that I love to sing, American Anthem. All we've been given by those who came before. With what we were given, we are determined to leave more. We want to build on what we were given. Instead, we're seeing it taking it out from under our feet like quicksand seeping away. This is what my father's. This is why I wrote the book, because this is my father's story. If you take the 2 or 3 hours to study it, you'll see how all this has gone down. From a guy that just wants to do the best he possibly can as a scholar, as an athlete, gets a scholarship to Harvard, volunteers for the Navy, becomes an officer on MacArthur's flagship, and encounters the top brass of that scenario. Then he goes to law school, goes to the FBI, and is one of Hoover's top guys that's working with the Russians. Not the Soviets, but the Russians that are spying for America. And he's like, according to what I now know, Hoover's top Russian expert in terms of interrogating and learning from the Russians. So now we've got somebody who has dedicated his life to protecting America, and he's drafted by Kennedy to go to the Pentagon, And then he ends up fighting against the CIA, and fighting against the CIA to the extent of launching a mission into Laos to catch them buying drugs, the drugs that are going to end up in our servicemen that are in Saigon that are going to end up hooked on heroin, which is what happened. And so here you have a guy that's trying to stop all this, the good guy, the person who's supposed to be the hero in the story, but then suddenly he gets deathly ill, and within a few months, he's gone. That's the story of my father, and that is the story of our life, of our freedoms going away, just like my dad's life went away. There's TDY by Doug Valentine, which is the story of that mission into Laos, and it just this is a story that if people want to share it and start confronting power, people in power, to say, hey, you know what, is it true that Alan Dulles was the enemy of Tom O'Loughlin, and can you tell us, did that health alteration committee, is that what happened? Is that what got him? Can you open those files up for us, please? Pushing. It's this is something you can use to push for answers, and if you can unlock all of these secrets, then you can see, then the rest of the cards are going to fall on the table. That's what I think.
Absolutely. McDuff is a delicious character. He just is a delicious character. He just is this chest. He's got this icebox chest from his football days, Robert Mitchum type hero. And he just, every time you think he's just tired of doing one thing, he goes on and does another thing, And then we keep finding out about more stuff that he did. He's just such a delicious character. And when I was eating beef bourguignon the other night at the Diplomat, I said, this is McDuff. What a character. He just is. Every time he turns around, it's almost like Raiders of the Lost Ark, where the guy, falls off the submarine. You think, oh, he's dead. And then you see him swimming along the submarine. But this is the real life story. And that's what's so great about it. And the other thing is, it leads you to all these other stories, about the counterintelligence programs and working with the Russians to get the secrets and all this. It really is such a fun story. And then we found out about the Oswald and the Ruby thing with the Warren Commission, and just every time you turn a page here, it's just another great story of American history.
Mm-hmm. Now, John, wasn't your father's nickname Hammer?
No, that's the pseudonym that Doug Valentine used.
Oh, okay.
Because in the book, to protect other people's names,
right,
everybody's name got changed. So,
right.
So he did not know who my father was when he wrote the book.
Right.
That's the astonishing thing is that he and I didn't know each other at all until maybe a year ago, and then I got him on my show, and in the middle of the show we started realizing, hey, that's my dad. That's who that character was. So it has a sense of, he verifies my dad's story, and my dad's existence, and what we know about him fits perfectly into the story that Doug told about Pete, the young airman that ended up as a photographer on a very, very dangerous and deadly mission.
Yeah, the reason I ask is I get the sense, because I did read TDI as well, I get the sense that your father's contemporary, because I see him as an archetypal hero, I see him as a legendary character, but I think his contemporaries saw him as a special person too. They saw him as heroic, a living legend, so to speak. And I think when Doug Valentine was getting the story and putting it in fictional form based on his interviews and reportage, that he picked that Mike Hammer character as being part of that that archetype, this hard-boiled detective. He's seen it all, world weary. He's battling the bad guys, and he knows that, man, he might lose anybody. He still does it. He still does it. And he uses his fists when he needs to, and he can be a hard ass, but he's on our side.
Yeah. Well, and throw in Loomis into the mix here. I'm sorry, I'm kind of enjoying kind of our trips, John, to go up to, do the digging. The digging has half the fun. And here are two Rockefellers, not one, two of the four Rockefeller boys go to Loomis. And then you got DeMorenschild's brother, the brother of the one who puts Lee Harvey Oswald into Minsk and puts him into the Texas School Book Depository. That one, the smart one, the
Dimitri.
smart Dimitri, the smart DeMorenschild in the same school. And you got a couple of miles away, you got Bissell, and Bissell can't even get into his own hometown prep school. It's just such a great story. It's just got everything. Here George DeMorenschild is literally right down the street, bouncing Jackie Kennedy on his knee as Uncle George. It's just a juicy story.
I don't understand why Oliver Stone hasn't made a movie out of it yet.
Well,
maybe. John's got the rights.
Put it in his hands,
You know how it is with Oliver is you got to go there. You got to shoot everything, right? You got to go to every corner, and you got to go to every bookmaking joint. You got to go to every Tin Pan Alley shot. You got to get it perfectly framed, and you got to stand there, and then you have to do the history of that corner or whatever. And then, sure enough, he'll go to Cannes and he'll roll it up, and he'll say, hey, I've been made aware of new research, and here he comes with JFK2, and JFK2 still isn't in the United States. His second, his roll up after he, and when Andy and I and everyone down there in New Orleans were shooting that, all of a sudden we haven't heard anything for 25 years out of Oliver Stone, and here he comes. Hey, I'm going to do a second. Rejoinder, and we love it because now he comes out. What's the first thing he says? Well, the McCone memo really is the secret to understanding the whole JFK thing. It's like, okay, thanks. 30 years later, finally you said it. So we are making progress. I do agree with John. It is still amazing that these documents are still not public. 60 years ago now. What could be so important to national security that these things are still buried?
Yeah, well, and we know now that Golanevsky, which is really a big case that you have you opened my mind to studying that guy, and that just keeps on going and going. You never know what's the smoke and mirrors and what's the reality when you're studying the Golanevsky matter. But Kevin Coogan has just published. He just died, and he's just had published posthumously his book on Golanevsky, which I looked at a little bit of online today. And George, you're going to have to read that. It's really it's a whole new look at it by a serious author, and he's putting Bissell in the story. So of course Angleton's in it, but there it is. To your point, in 1958, as you know, Michael Golanowski wrote a letter to the FBI, to J. Edgar Hoover, offering to give him all kinds of intelligence on the Soviet Union, and delivered that to the consulate, I think in Bern, Switzerland, one of the American consulates. He delivered it, and the CIA got a hold of it instead of Hoover. And the CIA then kind of put it into the circular file and just forget about this, this guy's crazy. We don't want to talk to him. Well, and then, 2 years later, they get an opportunity from somebody else that comes along and says, hey, there's this guy, and so they say, oh, okay, well, let's get him. So they get him, and under some pretext, they bring him into CIA custody. And this is this is the FBI, the Soviet guy, the Golanowski, knows that he and Hoover are probably more on the same side than he and the CIA, because Hoover has a man in the Kremlin. And the CIA doesn't necessarily know that, but Hoover's doing much better intelligence work than the CIA is. The CIA, all they want to do is fun and games and blow things up and screw women and stuff. Now, excuse me, CIA, but that's what Alan Dulles wanted to do. Excuse me, but look at Alan Dulles and tell me I'm wrong. But anyway, to try to wrap this up, that whole scenario is part of what we don't know about yet. What was really going on in Warsaw? Who was running the thing in Warsaw? And I'm starting to learn about a whole bunch of new characters. The ambassador at the time, named Jacob Beam, B-E-A-M, looks very interesting to me. And so I'm going to be looking into that, and I'm sure you will too, because that is probably what my dad was working on.
Yeah, John, you're digging a rich groove here, a very rich vein, and there's the Scarbeck case gets, even though it was the first espionage case for the State Department, your dad worked on it. I can't believe that was the real Scarbeck. I believe, and I'm harboring a hunch here. I'm not saying it's supported, but who would Golanowski send as his ambassador? He's giving out in inner circle secrets of the White Russian hoi polloi, the inner circle, the insiders, to Hoover, okay, and to the English, because he wants to leverage himself out of this thing. He figures if he can rat out Kissinger, then he's going to have value, right? And so this Scarbeck, this woman named Scarbeck with the K,
yeah,
is very interesting, because she's the go-between that goes between Warsaw. She's the super spy. She's Churchill's favorite spy. She's going back and forth, and she's kind of going in between the Cambridge Five and this inner circle, this White Russian inner circle. And you remember, this is when all of the secrets are going back and forth with all the nuclear secrets with Russia at this time. And who gets the 68,000 files in 52? And who gets murdered? The woman Scarbeck is murdered and stabbed in that London apartment. I can't believe that Golanowski, the mastermind of the White Russian spy ring in Warsaw, didn't know the top White Russian, or I wouldn't say the top Polish spy, the Mata Hari of Poland. I find it hard to believe she wouldn't have been the envoy. So I think there's more to the story here with Scarbeck. I can't remember her first name, but she is a fascinating character on her own. And this whole idea of Nazis, or rebadged Nazis that have been sheep dipped as sort of Soviets that are defecting, coming into the United States and coming into our national laboratories, is the story. I'm convinced that McDuff's on this case. So we're just getting started. This is so exciting.
Yeah, and thank you, George. And you and I spent a couple of days down at the archives digging, and it's really paid off. So thank you again. Yeah, that's exciting stuff. That there is plenty of evidence now that just needs to be put together to show that the real internal war was going on, and still probably is going on in a sense. Although, of course, the FBI has long since been compromised into the CIA's, folded into their, becomes part of the CIA at this point. That's not necessarily true about the lower level agents or anything, because as we talk about so many times, there's layers to this. There's the ones at the bottom that are bushy tailed, bright eyed, want to be the greatest, Army guy or greatest FBI agent ever was, and they're excited about it. And then there's the ones that have already got the mortgage and the 2 kids, and they're like, I got to do my time, and doing your time is not exactly the what you had in mind when you signed up. But then if you want to advance, then you've got to start realizing that, hey, some of that weird stuff that they ask you to do, maybe it's not really on the up and up, and maybe, gosh, oh gosh, this is a mess. And then you think, golly, I sure would like to be a colonel, but look what you have to do if you're a colonel. And that's where McDuff is. That's where he is. He's at that colonel level. He was proud of his parking space at the Pentagon because he got to park with the colonels. That's closer in than parking with the lieutenants.
Yeah. So this gentleman that we're going to tomorrow is what made it to major and didn't make it to colonel. I agree with you, John. As soon as you get to that colonel level, to get to that general level, they were going to compromise you before you get in that inner circle. What did you say the author's name was of the latest Gulanowski book?
Yeah, it's Coogan. Kevin Coogan, Coogan.
I'll check that out.
I think he did a book on Francis Yockey many years ago.
I think you're right.
Yeah, he's a good writer. George, I want to ask you, these battles, these internecine battles are transgenerational. A couple of weeks ago when you're down in Florida, you met with Wayne Madsen talking about the JFK Jr. crash, right? So are you going to be showing any more of the interview that you did with Wayne Madsen? Because I thought that 4 minutes was incredible that he released with you.
Yeah, I'm going to go back to Florida and do a longer format with Wayne. I just wanted to get the juice out. Most people don't know Wayne worked for JFK Jr., so that was kind of like the big news there. But I did a longer format, but I didn't really like it because of the sound in the restaurant, and I want to reshoot it.
Okay,
it was a little bit overbearing with the music, and yeah, but
Man.
It is great content. It's great content. Wayne,
it was juicy. That's why I'm asking. 2 weeks later, I said, God, what was the rest of the conversation about? So
yeah, I mean, Wayne really, we couldn't be further apart, on the political spectrum, but I respect him so much. Same thing with Hopsiker. And here he's saying, hey, I interviewed, I'll give you the juice that I didn't get on, which was he was called by the flight instructor of JFK Jr. to meet him out at the tarmac in Baltimore, like he was a flight student, and meet him at 9 o'clock at night out on the tarmac. And he said, I'm Captain X or whatever pseudonym. And he said, hey, JFK was murdered. JFK Jr. was murdered. There's no way he wouldn't have known. He flipped the lights on, remotely for the landing strip lights. It was taking control. The Piper, whatever, Ranger, whatever the model was somehow remotely controlled and seized. And it becomes the kind of harbinger of 9/11.
Right.
It becomes the harbinger of 9/11. So that's why that's so interesting, because it's 99 and then 2001. So yeah, check that interview out. And it's just the whole side of Wayne I never knew. I knew he was in Africa. I knew he had spent all the time in Congo. He did all these investigations into African leaders that had died via strange plane accidents. But who knew that about JFK Jr.?
Right. And talk about citizen journalism. He was about ready to go to work for George Magazine under JFK Jr., right? His editorship.
Yep.
Now that would have changed the political terrain enormously.
Well, the story is that he had a packet of documents that he had been given by somebody like a McDuff that had the inside track on certain documents that hadn't become made available from the archives. You know, they were still classified, and he was going to give them to 25 or 30 different journal investigators and let them work independently and just let them all compete to try to find the answer to his father's death. And man, I still think that would be an incredible, race to truth,
Right. And it tells me that the quest for justice does not end, and the quest for justice on the behalf of Mr. Thomas O'Loughlin does not end either. It's still in process.
And along those lines, let me say, Mark Kulak, Housatonic Live on YouTube, he is digging, and he's digging deep, and he's doing fantastic work. So be sure and check him out and support his work. Most recently, he is back into the middle 60s now. With Leonard Horowitz, with the Special Virus Cancer Project, and his book Emerging Viruses, which I think is really, really crucial that people read and understand that book. It's one of the most important books I've on my bookshelf, Emerging Viruses by Horowitz. But he goes back before that. And now we're getting back towards the time that my dad was subjected to whatever killed him, whatever form of quick cancer they were doing back then. It had something to do with hepatitis and viruses and attacking the immune system. But we are focusing in so many ways. And boy, if we could get a smoking gun on what happened with my dad, it'd be almost a miracle. But I think miracles do happen, and so and they happen. You don't know what's going to happen. You never know if some amazing thing's going to drop, and suddenly the answer is there. Life is funny that way.
Well,
Yeah.
I'll second that immediately with Mark, and he's taken Leonard Horowitz and kind of blown the dust off of all of his early work on HIV and the weaponization of HIV, and how this wasn't the green monkey that accidentally bit the lion tamer in Congo, and all the other crazy stories they come up with. And he talks about this whole weaponization of HIV. And it leads straight into where we are now with, hey, the HIV inserts somehow end up inside coronavirus, and they're aerosolizing HIV. And when you put it in this kind of smooth curve, it all seems so logical. It's like, of course, they would then want to aerosolize it once they got where they wanted to be with the immune deficiency. That way anything could knock you out, and then that way anything could be blamed for your demise. And it was sort of like with your dad, the 1-2 punch. Compromise the immune system first with the hep C, and then you can come in later with something else. And Mark's doing this kind of he's showing the 3 books here that he's kind of melding into one, mind melding into one: Emerging Viruses, Lab 257, and the other book, I can't remember which one. But kind of all of those authors never had the benefit of knowing the other author's book. But Mark is now taking the advantage of being able to read all 3 simultaneously and synthesizing that. And he's just doing some great work right now.
All right, guys. 9 o'clock came quickly once again, as it usually does on Thursday nights when we have George Webb and Professor Hamamoto, and a very, very lively chat group. Thank you all for being here. I'll be with you tomorrow night. Let me do a quick plug for Mike Billington's coming back. You guys remember Mike Billington? He's one of the original Schiller Institute and LaRouche people. He spent 10 years in jail as a result of those trumped up charges against the LaRouche people, involving our own favorite nemesis, Robert Swan Mueller III, who prosecuted them back in the 90s. So after 10 years in jail for really being a thorn in the side of the Bush administration, he is a very, very active writer, a journalist with the Schiller Institute, and not only an expert on the economy and the effects of this COVID lockdown on the economy. But tomorrow night, we're going to step back and look at 9/11 together, because he, of course, in his generation, a few years before me, had a real perspective on what was going on. And so Mike Billington is going to join me tomorrow night, and I'm really looking forward to it. I'm grateful to him to take the time to spend with me to go through his recollections and some things I'm sure that probably nobody really has thought about or knows until we have our conversation. So I'm really looking forward to that tomorrow night, 8 o'clock, right here on McDuff Lives 2, and we'll be co-broadcasting as we're starting to activate Screaming Ospreys TV at screamingospreys.com. So check that out too. All right, George, thank you for being here.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Doctor.
All right. Thank you, George. Thank you, John. Thank you very much, everybody in the audience.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.